EKOTÜRK'ten merhabalar. Bugün Amerika'dan çok özel bir konuğumuz var. Michigan State Üniversitesi'nden ekonomi profesörü Lize Cook bizlerle. Kendisi ırkçılık temelli ekonomik eşitsizlik çalışan, aynı zamanda Obama döneminde, başkanlığı döneminde kendisinin ekonomi danışmanlığını da yapmış bir isim. Profesör Cook'la Amerika'da siyahi George Floyd'un beyaz bir polis memuru tarafından öldürülmesi sonrası başlayan protestoları, huzursuzluğun altında yatan temel sebepleri, siyahilerin sorunlarını, ırkçılığı ve ekonomik eşitsizliği konuşacağız. Hi Professor, it's a great honor for me to have you. Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. Welcome to Turkey digitally. Welcome to Turkey again, Professor. So, Professor, the protests in the U.S. quickly spread all across the country following the murder of George Floyd by a white police officer. But it seems there is a great anger. So what is really being protested on the streets? How do you explain this anger, and is it political or more economic?
Well, I think it is both. This has both economic and political dimensions. So let's just take a step back. This is rooted in slavery and slavery in the United States. There are problems that have not been resolved related to the trajectory that the country has been on since the time of slavery. So the the racial wealth gap can find its roots in slavery and the inability of the country to deliver on its promise of 40 acres and a mule, for example. So people are protesting all of the disparities that have followed from that period. So those disparities are in health, they're in police protection and behavior, they're in political outcomes, they're all over. You can't avoid any of them. Educational outcomes, they're everywhere. And that's why people are angry. They've certainly seen that the pandemic has disproportionately affected African Americans, as well as Latinos. And this is just one more disparity on top of everything else. And then everybody is at home, everybody's sheltering in place and watching this video of a modern day lynching. And it is just it's outrageous. It is terrible. And hopefully there will be justice for the killers of George Floyd.
So you think until when these protests will continue? I mean, what they really expect, what they really want, the protesters, African Americans or in general?
Well, that's a good question. I think that a number of them are asking for a full set of structural reforms, that will address racism, that leads to these racial disparities, that leads to the kind of protest we see. And that's what we saw with the civil rights movement. You had protests and you had then people thinking broadly about to overhaul the system. That's where the war on poverty came from. The policies in the 1960s and 70s meant to address these inequities. And those were rolled back. And my sense is that there is need for those to be reinvigorated, or blue sky, big ideas to come forward and to be implemented and to be enforced, to be sustained.
Okay, Professor, as you also stated, recently COVID-19 clearly showed us the racial disparities in the US, not only in health, as you also mentioned, but from education to home ownership, to almost all areas. Statistics actually tell the whole story. So how this
Right.
racial repression and discrimination is built into the US economy? Could you explain us from an economic perspective, since we are an economy channel?
That's a good question. So yes, it's baked into the U.S. economy in several different ways. So part of my research is on innovation, and what I see is that it is very difficult for African Americans to participate fully and robustly in the innovation economy, and that goes from STEM training at the very beginning and education, practice as inventors, practice and training as inventors, and then commercialization. If you look at the 10 or 20 wealthiest people in the world, most of them are gain their wealth through the tech economy. And there's no Black person on that list. And these people have wealth, let's say like Jeff Bezos, wealth that's converging to $1 trillion. And we're just left out of that almost completely. 1 to 5% of African American founders receive VC funding. And that's one avenue for it's one. This is just an indication, one avenue of funding and getting off the ground as an entrepreneur, as a startup founder.
Actually, Professor, as the first Black president, Obama had a great chance and a historic opportunity to address at least some of the root causes of this problem. And surely African Americans had great expectations from him, even me, actually. We expected a lot from him. And you were among his advisors. So how successful was he? Did he make some improvement during his time? At least he tried, or he created disappointment? What do you think?
I think certainly he tried, and he tried along several different dimensions. I think one of the biggest pieces of legislation that he was able to get through, and something I see as connected to the civil rights movement, is the ACA, the healthcare law. And because of the disparities that exist with respect to African Americans, let's say very different statistics with respect to life expectancy between African Americans and whites, this is something that needed to be addressed urgently. So I believe that this was a big advancement for the country, a big advancement for a developed country trying to catch up to other developed countries, and certainly something that would help African Americans disproportionately, given their the healthcare disparities.
So after Obama, I think you're talking about Obamacare, basically, right? As far as I know.
That's Obamacare, right? Mm-hmm.
But Trump was extremely against that, so now it's gone. I mean, you think under Trump administration, there is no way to solve this problem. So what should be done to address?
The Obamacare has not been repealed, and there are still people on it. We still have more insurance coverage than we've ever had in modern times. So I think that this is still the right path, and I think that it should be taken up, pursued, and enhanced. It's not perfect. We don't have universal health care coverage yet, but I'm hoping that will be in the future. You have to start somewhere.
Yeah. So you think this is the health, I mean, surely it's the biggest, most important issue, especially we saw that after the pandemic, but you think the biggest problem for African Americans in the US now is healthcare issue?
No, the biggest problem is racism.
I mean, yeah, but related to that,
The problem
what
is
the biggest
racism. If
related to that issue, what is the biggest problem?
If we allow white supremacist groups, for example, to continue to operate out in the open as they did in Charlottesville, and as a 2009 report from Homeland Security said they are operating, but we're not taking action against them, this is infiltrating every part of American life, just as it happened in the late 19th century, early 20th century. And we have to confront this. We have to make sure that, we're going to address all of these problems: education, healthcare, housing, credit, all the things that relate to society and the economy. In order for African Americans to participate fully, we have to address the structural factors. And the structural factor that is most salient now is racism. That's what leads to all these racial disparities. So unless we're talking about reforms that address all of these issues and get to the source of these issues, we're just dancing around the edges of the problems.
So you think this time some of at least the issues will be addressed? Because this time protests are huge. I mean,
my relatives marched with Martin Luther King Jr. so that my generation would be able to take part in American life more fully. And what my generation and subsequent generations are asking is that we would like to participate even more fully. It's not that we're participating fully yet. So I would say I am absolutely hopeful that every generation has to keep pushing. These are not God-given rights that just sit there. They have to be defended with every generation.
Certainly. Did you also participate, Professor, on the streets, the protests?
Yes, and I was beaten up desegregating schools in Georgia when I was growing up. So I wasn't protesting. I was just being beaten for being my color. So I'm just saying that I did participate in protest in college. I participated in a lot of protests in college. And now I'm choosing to use my voice in a slightly different way. But I support these protests that highlight the problems of structural racism.
Yeah, and I'm following your research really. I mean, your research is very admiring, and I really appreciate and follow all your research. I was gonna ask, you already touched upon that, but I was gonna ask lastly your own personal experience as an African American woman and an academic. How was your own personal experience in terms of racial discrimination in the US? Can you elaborate a little bit more?
Well, I would say that it has been sobering and depressing to know people who've passed away due to COVID-19, to see many more people I don't know who are passing away due to COVID-19, and not because of anything they chose to do. It is because African Americans are heavily concentrated in low wage work that is public facing. They can't do their jobs from home. So they've been deemed essential workers, and they are coming in contact with a lot of people who have COVID-19, won't wear masks, and they're put in harm's way. So that is a structural problem, that they are concentrated in these particular jobs and occupations. And that's something that absolutely has to change. So personally, I am quite fearful, because I've had friends to pass away, and they didn't have time to say goodbye to their loved ones. We with respect to funerals, we can't have them. That's a big part of the African American tradition, saying goodbye to one's and honoring one's ancestors. So I think that this is going to take a lot of healing once it's over. But we have to address the root causes, not just the manifestation here, the manifestation there, the manifestation in health, the manifestation in policing. We have to address the root causes.
Yeah. So I think police reforms, because right now, I think in the US, some of reforms are, some reform promises are being made, but certainly, like policing reform is not going to be enough, I think, because you are also mentioning the root causes, right? I mean, police reform is not going to be enough for sure.
Yes. I mean, it really depends. I mean, Camden, New Jersey reformed its police department, but that was a deep structural change. That was a disbandment of the police force. And homicides have gone down by 50%. That means that there is some other solution. So I would like to see solutions like that coming forward that don't include people being able to operate with impunity and putting all of our lives in danger. Because while they're focusing on a person who is, selling a cigarette or is suspected of a crime or just jogging, they are not paying attention to other crimes, legitimate crimes. So I think that we have to be careful about how we're using our resources and deploying our resources, and certainly need to make sure that everybody is accountable. The leadership is accountable. Each individual officer is accountable.
Yeah. So my last question will be, Professor, actually, while I was doing research, I came across a very interesting project. I think it's by your cousin. The project was called Soul City. I think it's in North Carolina. Yes. Am I right? Could you tell us more about that interesting project? Is it still valid? I mean, there is a city called Soul City in the US. Can you tell me more?
So Soul City still exists. It's still, if you Google it on Google Maps, you'll see where it is. It was an exciting project to see every summer. So my parents used to take us as children to see its development every year. So it went from one trailer to several trailers to buildings. And it was just an amazing sight to see that my cousin was building a city. He dreamed of what America would be, and he was striving to create that. And he was addressing all of these structural issues that we're talking about. Structural issues of racism, environmental racism, access to jobs, access to opportunity, and he attracted IBM there. And that is, a type of industry that is in the innovation economy, and there can be lots of positive spillovers from having an employer like that there. So this left a deep impression on me, and this is what got me interested in macroeconomics. He had to set up everything. He had to set up the economy that existed in that particular place from nothing. So I am really proud of him and really proud of that effort. It was one of several model cities that were constructed during this period. So it wasn't on its own. There were several model cities. And most of those model cities had some challenges, still have some challenges, but some parts of Seoul City are still functioning from what I understand. But I'm writing more about this. My sister and I are writing a book about this.
Really? I would love to read it, because I lived in the US actually, but I never knew that there was a city called Seoul City. Such a shame. I mean, such a pity that I didn't visit while I was there.
Yes. Well, next time, and I'll take you.
Please take me there, Professor.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you very much for your time, and please stay safe and strong.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thank you very much.